In the quiet dawn of the medieval world, the land wakes slowly beneath a pale gray sky mist, clinging to riverbanks and low fields as church bells echo faintly across stone villages and timber farms where survival is not a concept, but a daily negotiation with hunger, cold, and time itself. This is a world without electricity, without refrigeration, without certainty of the next harvest, and yet, within these harsh limits, medieval people learned secrets that feel almost impossible today. Secrets that allowed meat to endure not for weeks or months, but for decades. As winter winds cut through wool cloaks and leather boots, sink into frozen mud, the smell of wood smoke hangs heavy in the air, curling from chimneys blackened by years of use. And inside these homes, preservation is not a luxury, but the thin line between life and death. Every animal slaughtered is a moment of gravity, for nothing can be wasted, not the hide, not the bone, not the fat, and certainly not the meat. In a low timber hall lit by firelight, iron hooks hang from thick beams, and slabs of flesh are raised carefully by rough hands that understand patience better than any modern machine. The crackle of the hearth mixes with the distant clang of a blacksmith's hammer and the murmured prayers of women salting meat by candlelight, knowing that this work will feed children long after snow buries the fields. Medieval preservation was born from fear and foresight, shaped by famine, wars, and winters that lasted longer than memory. Armies marched for months across hostile land, carrying meat that could not spoil monasteries, stored food to survive sieges that might stretch across generations, and remote mountain villages learned to preserve protein so completely that even 20 years later it could still be eaten. This was not guesswork, it was tradition refined by centuries of failure and loss. Salt mined from deep underground or gathered from distant coasts became more precious than gold rubbed into meat, until it drew out life itself, replacing moisture with time. Smoke from slow-burning oak and beech seeped into flesh, not just flavoring it, but sealing it against decay, while cold, dry air from stone cellars and alpine winds did the rest. These methods were not written in books, but carved into memory passed from father to son, mother to daughter as sacred knowledge. Walk through a medieval market, and you would hear the calls of merchants, the creak of carts, the bleating of livestock, and beneath it, all the unmistakable scent of preserved meat, sharp, smoky, salty, a promise that hunger would not win this year. Hanging sausages dark as iron, slabs of beef hardened like wood, and cut so dense they had to be soaked for days before cooking. Time itself became an ingredient, and patience the most powerful tool, in castles where banners snapped in the wind and guards paced stone walls. Food stores were counted not in meals, but in years. Deep vaults beneath the keep held meats preserved so completely they outlived kings and wars. This knowledge allowed civilizations to endure plagues, winters, and sieges that would have destroyed less prepared societies. As torchlight flickered against ancient stone and shadows danced across walls stained by smoke, the medieval world quietly mastered something modern life has almost forgotten: that survival is not about speed, but about respect for nature's limits and understanding how to bend them without breaking them. And as the sun rises higher over frost-covered fields and the village stirs to life, the preserved meat, hanging silently in dark rooms, stands as proof that in an age without machines, humanity learned to command time itself, not through power but through patience, tradition, and an unbroken chain of knowledge that turned necessity into mastery. As winter tightens its grip, the medieval world turns inward and beneath castles, monasteries, and humble cottages, the earth itself becomes an ally. Stone cellars carved deep into hillsides breathe cold, steady air. Walls slick with moisture, floors packed hard with clay and straw, where footsteps echo softly and every sound feels swallowed by darkness. Here meat rests suspended in time, wrapped in linen rubbed with salt, darkened by smoke, and watched over like treasure. Monks in heavy wool habits move slowly through torchlit corridors, counting stores with careful hands, knowing these chambers must outlast war, famine, and siege. The air smells of damp stone, ash, and old iron, and the silence is broken only by dripping water and distant chanting above. Preservation is no longer just survival, but strategy for kings plan campaigns based on what these rooms can sustain, and villages measure security by how full their hooks remain. Far from cities and mountain valleys where snow seals passes for months, shepherds rely on wind and altitude hanging meat where cold, dry air strips away moisture until decay has no place to begin. Animals are slaughtered at precise moments when the cold is sharp enough to halt rot, but not so brutal that flesh freezes unevenly and cracks. Hands numb with cold work, methodically slicing, salting, rubbing, and waiting as if time itself were a tool to be guided rather than rushed. Smokehouses stand apart from homes, squat wooden structures with blackened roofs, where fires burn low for weeks, not roaring but whispering, releasing thick blue smoke that creeps slowly into every fiber of meat. The scent drifts through villages mixing with pine resin, wet earth, and animal musk, a smell that signals safety to those who know it. Children grow up recognizing that smell as comfort, as certainty, as proof that winter will not starve them. Trade routes stretch across Europe, carrying barrels of preserved meat across seas and mountains, feeding sailors, soldiers, pilgrims, and merchants who travel for years without seeing home. This food becomes currency, tribute, and insurance against the unknown, and its durability reshapes the medieval world, allowing distant lands to connect and armies to move farther than ever before. In great halls where tapestries sway in the draught and iron chandeliers glow with firelight, lords feast on meat preserved long before their reign began, the texture dense, the flavor deep, transformed by time itself. Cooks soak and simmer these cuts, slowly reawakening them with herbs, wine, and heat, turning preservation into ritual and sustenance into ceremony. Nothing about this process is hurried, for haste brings ruin and ruin brings hunger. Every failed attempt is remembered, every success becomes law. Women pass knowledge through quiet instruction hands, guiding hands beside hearths while outside snow piles against doors, and wolves howl at the edge of torchlight. The medieval method is not a single trick, but a harmony of cold smoke, salt air, and patience, balanced with the instincts of people who read weather, seasons, and animals as clearly as books. As dawn breaks again over frozen fields and smoke rises in thin lines toward a pale sun, the preserved meat, hidden away in darkness, carries with it the weight of generations who learned that to defeat time one must move at its pace and trust that what is done carefully will endure long after the maker is gone. As years pass and kingdoms rise and fall, the true power of medieval preservation reveals itself not in daily meals but in moments of absolute crisis, when the world collapses into hunger and fear, and the stored meat becomes the difference between endurance and extinction. Imagine a castle under siege, its gates sealed, iron chains drawn tight as enemy banners flutter beyond arrow range, and winter descends with merciless certainty. Inside the walls, fires burn low to conserve fuel. Breath clouds the air, and footsteps echo through stone corridors worn smooth by centuries. Deep beneath, the keep guards descend narrow staircases carrying torches whose flames hiss against damp air, and there in vaulted chambers carved into bedrock lie rows of hanging meat, darkened almost to black, hardened by smoke and time, untouched by rot despite the years that have passed. These stores were prepared long before the siege began by hands now dead, by rulers long forgotten, yet their foresight feeds the living. Slabs are cut with effort, blades biting slowly into dense flesh that smells of smoke and salt and earth. When cooked, it releases aromas that fill the halls, restoring morale, reminding those who eat that they are part of something unbroken. Outside, famine ravages the land, but within these walls the ancient method holds firm. Monasteries too become islands of survival as bells toll through empty valleys, and monks move in silence through cloisters, frost forming on stone arches, while in subterranean rooms preserved meat rests alongside dried grains and barrels of ale, forming a network of endurance that allows learning, faith, and culture to survive while chaos reigns beyond the gates. This durability astonishes modern minds, but for medieval people, it was the expected reward of discipline and patience. The method worked because it respected nature rather than fighting it, drawing moisture away, denying bacteria warmth and air, and allowing time itself to become a guardian rather than an enemy. In remote villages, elders tell stories of meat eaten 2 decades after it was prepared during winters so harsh even rivers froze. Solid stories not told with wonder, but with calm certainty because the proof lay hanging in their cellars. This knowledge spreads quietly across generations, refined by climate and terrain, each region adapting the same principles to its own winds, woods, and stone. Coastal communities rely on fierce salt winds inland. Forests offer smoke from ancient trees. Mountain air strips flesh clean and dry, all bound by the same understanding that decay is not inevitable if every step is honored. The soundscape of this world is constant and alive, the low murmur of prayers, the scrape of knives on wood, the hiss of smoke, the groan of cellar doors opening after years of silence. Even the preserved meat itself becomes part of the atmosphere, absorbing the history of the place where it waits. When it is finally brought back to life over flame, it carries with it the memory of winters survived and hands that worked by firelight long ago. This is not merely food, but stored time, stored labor, stored hope. As torchlight flickers and shadows stretch across stone walls blackened by centuries, the medieval method stands revealed as a quiet triumph of human wisdom, a system so resilient that it could outlast wars, plagues, and the lives of those who created it, proving that in an age without machines, humanity learned to make patience stronger than decay and memory stronger than death. As the medieval world moves toward an uncertain future, this ancient knowledge settles deep into daily life, becoming invisible yet essential, woven into every rhythm of survival and belief. Preservation is no longer just an act of necessity, but a quiet philosophy shaping how people understand time, responsibility, and legacy. In villages where timber houses lean under the weight of snow and rain, children grow up watching elders work, slowly, deliberately, teaching without words that haste is dangerous and patience is strength. The preparation of meat becomes almost ceremonial, carried out at dawn or dusk when light is soft and silence encourages focus. Knives are sharpened with care, salt is measured by feel, smoke is tended like a living thing, fed gently so it does not burn too hot or die too soon. The crackle of embers and the steady breath of wind through shutters form a soundtrack of concentration, while outside seasons turn indifferent to human effort. Women hum old melodies while rubbing salt into flesh. Songs older than any church songs that carry instructions hidden in rhythm and repetition, ensuring nothing is forgotten, even by those who cannot read. Clothing absorbs the scent of smoke, wool cloaks, leather aprons, hair and skin, all marked by the work, so that preservation follows people into markets, chapels, and fields. This smell becomes identity, a signal of preparedness that others recognize instantly. Travelers passing through know which villages will survive winter simply by what hangs from their beams. In great cities, guilds form around meat preservation, enforcing standards and guarding secrets, regulating smokehouses, cellars, and trade routes, because failure does not only mean spoilage, but sickness and death. Laws are written not out of control, but out of respect for how delicate the balance truly is. In castle kitchens, massive hearths glow day and night, pots simmer slowly, reawakening preserved meat for feasts that celebrate victories, weddings, and holy days, moments when the past feeds the present quite literally. Each bite carries years of waiting and care, reminding even the powerful that their comfort depends on unseen labor done long before their command. Beyond stone walls and forests, hunters prepare game using the same principles, trusting smoke, cold, and air to guard their harvest as they move deeper into wilderness, following seasons rather than calendars. The preserved meat allows exploration, pilgrimage, and trade across distances once impossible. creating a medieval world more connected than it appears at first glance. As plagues sweep through, towns and bells toll, endlessly preserved food becomes a shield against desperation, reducing the need to risk exposure in search of fresh supplies, allowing communities to isolate, endure, and rebuild. In these moments, the true genius of the method reveals itself not in flavor or longevity, but in how it buys time, when time is the most precious resource of all. As torchlight flickers against stone and wood alike and the wind howls outside shuttered homes, the medieval people sleep knowing that tomorrow, next winter, or even decades from now, food waits patiently in darkness. This trust changes how fear is faced, how wars are fought, how faith is practiced, because survival is no longer a daily panic but a managed certainty. The preserved meat hanging silently in cellars and halls becomes a quiet monument to human foresight, proving that even in an age often remembered for brutality and ignorance, there existed a deep, intelligent harmony between people and their world. A harmony built not on domination, but understanding, where the mastery of time itself was achieved through humility, discipline, and respect for the slow, unyielding rhythms of nature. As the medieval age slowly gives way to new centuries and unfamiliar inventions, the ancient preserved meat remains hanging in shadowed rooms, untouched by noise of progress, a final witness to a world that understood endurance more deeply than speed. In forgotten cellars beneath ruined castles and abandoned monasteries, iron hooks still rust quietly, bearing the weight of a method that once fed nations. Dust settles thick on stone floors, and roots creep through cracks while outside forests reclaim roads and walls. Yet within these dark spaces the air remains cool, steady, and still the same. Conditions that once guarded food for decades. Travelers centuries later open these chambers and find the silence heavy, almost reverent, as if time itself has paused out of respect. The preserved meat is no longer meant to be eaten, but its presence tells a story far louder than words. It speaks of people who planned not for convenience, but for survival, who worked knowing they might never taste the results of their labor, yet trusted future hands to finish the story. This mindset shaped medieval civilization more than crowns or battles, teaching communities to think in generations rather than seasons. The crackle of torches once guided careful steps here, and the smell of smoke once meant safety rather than flavor. Today those echoes remain in the stones and timbers, absorbing centuries of breath, effort, and hope. Modern eyes may see the past as primitive, yet this knowledge rivaled any technology in its power because it mastered the one enemy no sword could defeat: decay. Long before laboratories and machines, medieval people learned to read moisture, wind, temperature, and time like a language spoken by the earth itself. They listened and adapted rather than forcing answers, and in doing so created a system so resilient it could preserve life through 20 years of uncertainty. This understanding extended beyond food, shaping how they built homes, chose settlements, and prepared for disaster, always assuming hardship would come and meeting it with calm preparation. The preserved meat hanging silently in darkness becomes a symbol of this philosophy, a reminder that true strength is often invisible, hidden away until the moment it is needed most. As the torchlight of history fades and the modern world hums with constant motion, the medieval method stands in quiet contrast, asking whether speed has replaced wisdom, whether abundance has erased foresight. In a time when food travels thousands of miles and spoils in days, the idea that flesh once endured for decades feels almost mythical, yet it was real, grounded in discipline, patience, and respect for natural law. The wind that once dried meat still whispers through ruined halls. The smoke that once sealed survival still clings faintly to stone and wood, and the silence of those cellars still carries the weight of lives saved. As dawn breaks over crumbling battlements and ivy-covered walls, birdsong replaces the clang of armor, and the medieval world slips further into memory, but its lessons remain waiting to be remembered. This is not merely a story of preservation, but of human resilience of communities that refused to surrender to hunger or fear, and instead chose preparation over panic and patience over haste. And as the final light fades across ancient stone and forests reclaim their ground, the legacy of that forgotten method endures, quietly reminding us that long before machines, humanity learned to preserve not just meat but time itself, leaving behind a wisdom that still hangs in the shadows, waiting for those willing to listen.